Mechanic 4 and I'm the Coastal Wetlands and Climate Change Project Manager with SeyCCAT. The Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust, or SeyCCAT for short, started in 2015 as an independent trust. SeyCCAT supports the government of Seychelles in undertaking cutting-edge innovations, such as facilitating the transactions for the Debt for Nature swap, supporting the Marine Spatial Plan of 1.4 million square kilometers, as well as managing some of the proceeds from the Blue Bond. We are continuing our support with the government of Seychelles, this time through the Coastal Wetlands and Climate Change Project. The project aims to integrate nature-based solutions into the country's Nationally Determined Contribution, or NDC, with a focus on coastal wetlands, particularly seagrass meadows. This will involve cutting-edge innovations such as seagrass mapping and assigning blue carbon values to integrate into the NDC.
The NDC is the government-led commitment to address climate change through the UN Climate Convention, and each country, each government is putting forward their own contribution to what they're planning to do to address climate change for both mitigation and adaptation. And for blue carbon ecosystems and coastal wetlands, that level of commitment is really important to include in an NDC, as it demonstrates the political commitment to protecting, restoring or conserving those blue carbon ecosystems, as well as helping to identify priorities from the government to help identify where there's areas for implementation activities, whether that's restoration or conservation or other protection measures. It also is a way to enhance and help direct where some of the priorities are for potential funding in the future. So helping to identify where those priorities are shows that those coastal wetlands are important for the government, they're important for climate change, and should be prioritized for implementation and funding for that work.
So we're delighted to be partnering with SeyCCAT to help deliver on the government's ambition for coastal wetlands in their next nationally determined contribution. The 2020 revisions to nationally determined contributions are an important political milestone for oceans and nature-based solutions more broadly in tackling climate change. And we're hopeful that this piece of work will not only be of benefit in advancing understanding and protection of seagrass in Seychelles, but in providing learnings for similarly ambitious nations around the world.
Seagrass does a lot of things. For example, it binds sediments, so that when you have a storm, the seagrass tends to have very deep roots. It holds itself in place, and you might have a cyclone, and the seagrass will usually stay in place and holds onto the sediments, so you don't have massive erosion, for example. Also, the blades of seagrass, that it tends to baffle the currents so that it keeps the sediments down, so they don't get caught up into the water column and taken somewhere else where they can do damage, for example, smother corals. Seagrasses and corals get along very well. The seagrasses are constantly taking in carbon dioxide and giving off oxygen, which is the opposite of what people do, for example, and what fishes and other things do. And this is important because one of the big problems that we're facing with climate change is the acidification of the ocean. So what's happening is carbon dioxide gets into the water becomes more acidic, and it actually can melt coral skeletons, seashells, mollusk skeletons. And this is what people are very much afraid of, is all the calcareous animals could be literally melting away in future decades. And what seagrasses do is they remove the carbon dioxide, and that reduces the acidity in the water and makes it healthier for these shelled creatures like corals, like mollusks. And in fact, studies have shown that if a seagrass is in the area of a coral reef, it can have as much as 20% more calcification in its skeletons. It provides habitat for dugongs in the far southwest part of Seychelles at El Dabra. And the dugong is a seagrass eater, so they need seagrass if they're going to survive. And then, of course, your sea turtles very much need seagrass. Your Green turtles feed almost exclusively on seagrass. And the hawksbill, which does not eat seagrass, it does eat little animals that are living in amongst the seagrass roots. And so they like the seagrass. You'll often find hawksbills in a seagrass bed, even though they're not eating the seagrass itself. They're eating the things that also live in the bed. It provides habitat for commercially important fishes. For example, here in Seychelles, there's a rabbitfish fishery, cordonnier, which depends on seagrass. These little cordonnier, little rabbitfish, go in and feed in the seagrass beds. And some of our scientists are studying that now in Seychelles, which is great.
So we tracked the movements of rabbitfish around Dennis Island. We had placed acoustic receivers in the seagrass habitats, in the coral habitats, and surround the whole island. We acoustically tagged them with internal tags, and we monitored their movements for a period of 6 months. And we found that they were moving out from the coral habitats into the seagrass habitats during the day to feed, presumably, and then they would move back to the coral habitats at night. So this kind of shows that they were using both habitats for their daily movements, and it shows the importance that these habitats might play for commercial species such as rabbitfish. We also we did statistical modeling to show that the exact ratio of seagrass to coral was 1.6 to 1 coral to seagrass ratio. That was the most, it was a habitat where we got the most pings from the receivers. So this shows that they prefer habitats that have coral, but seagrass needs to be present. So as I said, rabbitfish are quite a commercial species of Seychelles. They make up 60% of the artisanal fishery. And so this research highlights the importance that seagrass habitats play to commercial species such as rabbitfish.
We're coordinating a science effort on this project to map the seagrass ecosystems of Seychelles, but also to then turn those maps into numbers of carbon underlying the seagrass systems. So to do that, we're partnering with a number of different organizations involved with different parts of the process. So there are, I guess, 3 main parts of that operation. There's a mapping exercise, and for that we're using a lot of satellite data to map both in the inner islands, but also some of the more remote outer islands. To be able to make those maps, what we need is what we would call ground control data. So observations on the seafloor, accurately positioned with a GPS, so we can tell exactly what the seafloor bottom type is in a particular region. And to do that, we're partnering with a number of organizations in country, including the University of Seychelles, the Blue Economy Research Institute there, the Island Conservation Society, to coordinate that effort. In terms of the mapping exercise, we're working with the Allen Coral Atlas and scientists from the University of Queensland in Australia, as well as from the German Aerospace Agency. And then the third part of the project is, as I said, turning those maps of seagrass into some estimate of carbon. And to do that, what we need to do is do a coring exercise where you go out to these areas, you put a core down through the sediment to extract the soil layer, and then out of that we get a number for the amount of carbon in a particular area. And for that work we're partnering with folks both in country but also at the University of Deakin in Australia. So pulling all of those different data together, we're able to identify the regions of Seychelles which are particularly important for seagrass habitats, but also the areas which are going to be very rich in carbon.
So Barry has been consulted very early in this project because of our expertise in environmental science in general, and more specifically in marine science. So we met the Pew people, and they put us in contact with experts from the University of Oxford. And I've been collaborating very closely with Guillaume to design the job that we are going to do together. So University of Oxford will analyze the satellite imagery and provide some maps of what they think is the seagrass. And our role will be in collaboration with the University of Oxford to ground truth the data. It's to go on site and test the validity of the model that they produce to make sure that we have seagrass, to determine which type of seagrass we have, and to determine their density so that we can draw better maps that will be used by the end of this project.
As part of the project, the data that will be collected will be shared with the government of Seychelles. It will be hosted under the Coastal Adaptation Management section under the Ministry of Environment, Energy and Climate Change. Also, local NGOs and experts will benefit from capacity building sessions on blue carbon and blue carbon stock assessments. Seychellois and other stakeholders will also be sensitized about the importance of seagrass and other blue carbon ecosystems. As an innovative financing mechanism, we are also keen to develop a blue carbon financing mechanism to support our efforts for sustainable management of the ocean and adapt to the effects of climate change. For more information, please visit our website www.SeyCCAT.org or follow us on our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram to keep up to date.